In the last video, I showed you how to use a group name attribute for parameters within a command using Amilious Console. In this video, I wanted to show you how to create a conditional parameter attribute, but I think it would be better for this video if I just walk you through one of the ones I've already created and explain how it works. So we're going to go through our min value attribute. Alright, so first of all, up on the top you can see I have this attribute on the top called attribute usage, and you don't have to add this when you create a conditional attribute unless you don't want to allow multiple. Then you need to do it because the default, the conditional parameter attribute, the default uses multiple. So if you don't want to allow multiple versions of your attribute, you need to set on the top that it's false. So all you need to do is create a class. I call this one max value attribute, and extend from conditional parameter attribute. If you add the missing members that it will ask you to do, it'll give you this public bool validate parameter method, and it's also going to give you this valid types. So now what the valid types is going to return, it needs to return all the types that this parameter or this attribute can be used on. So this will only be used on types of string, decimal, double, float, s byte, short, int, long, byte, u short, int, or u long. Anything else, it's just going to skip this conditional parameter attribute. It's not going to check it unless the value is of one of these types. So I'm going ahead and returning the types there. All right, the next thing on here is you can override the description. So just do public override string attribute help description, and you can set the description to whatever you would like. That should be maximum. All right. So now in here, the actual check is done in the validate parameter. And what validate parameter is going to do, it's going to be called when the command is trying to execute, before it executes, to make sure everything is valid. So if you return true, everything is good and the command will execute. If you return false, the command will not execute. It gives you some information that you can use to make your decision here, such as command context, the value of the parameter, the position of the parameter, and this number does not count the command context. The variable after, or the parameter after command context, will be the first parameter. All right, next it passes the parameter info, and that's all the reflection info for that actual parameter. And then the command variation. So this is the actual command that's trying to execute. So now when it passes you a value, it's going to be a generic value. And so we need to do some checking on the type. So what I'm doing here is I'm checking if it's a string. So I'm doing that by saying is string. So what this is doing is if it is a string, this string value here will be a casted version of this value. And if it is not a string, then this block of code will not execute. So here, if it's a string, I'm checking the length of the string. That's where I'm comparing against the max value. And if it is okay, it's going to return true. Otherwise, it's going to print an error and return false. Then I do the same thing, checking for decimals, double float, s byte short, int, long, byte, u short, u int, and u long. And it returns true if it's valid. And if it is not valid, then we're creating another error message here and returning false. So yeah, these are a bit complicated, and it's hard for me to create a test conditional parameter attribute because everything that I can think of that will be useful, I'll be creating for this package anyways. But if there's something else you want, you can always create it yourself by creating a conditional parameter attribute. Okay, let's go ahead and test this out. back in our player health script, I added a minimum and maximum value to our heal command. Now, the maximum value I could actually just set to our max health or whatever. But I'm just going to remove that because that's not actually practical. But the minimum value is, we don't want to be able to heal a player with negative health. We don't want to add negative health. And to be honest, that's a check that should be being done here as well. But it is not. But our command should not allow us to do it with negative health because we have the min value set to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and save everything, jump over to Unity, and test that out. Alright, so now if I go to our health command and our heal command, if I try to put -10, it's not going to work because it needs to be greater than 0. But if I put 10, it's going to work. And it would do the same thing if I had the maximum value in there, but I removed it. But that's how you create conditional parameter attributes. And in the next video, we're going to be talking about another boring subject, and that is the iValid values for type provider.